Good morning or afternoon, depending on when you're watching the video. I'm Linda Crowder from Russell Specialty Books and Gifts, and this is, oh my goodness, I think our fifth author virtual event during the coronavirus time. So Barbara, would you like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hi, how is everybody today? It's morning where I am. I am a retired educator and historian. My background is I have undergraduate and graduate degrees in history, but I went into teaching, and I wound up in elementary school teaching. First I was going to go into high school. I bounced around. I wound up in elementary school teaching, and I taught everything from grades K through 7. And then I became interested in special education because I saw how many children had needs, and I really became interested in the field. So I went back and I got a master's and certification in special education. And that kind of evolved. I worked with really delayed children, mostly in the preschool area, even autistic children, Down syndrome, crack cocaine babies, very severely delayed children. And I wound up becoming a principal of a special ed preschool, and then an administrator in New York City for special ed programs. So I kind of ran the gamut, went from classroom into administration. But I always loved my history. So when I did retire from formal classroom and administration, I decided I was going to combine my two passions. And I didn't know quite how to do that. I mean, retirement lasted about 2 days before I decided this isn't going to work for me. It doesn't work for my husband either. He's, he of course does the illustrations for my books, and he is an artist and a writer himself. So we're both, very antsy. So what I did is I started to write for a local news magazine, and I did kind of historical articles that went with the theme of the magazine. And I still wanted to get back to working with kids. And, even though, I have children and grandchildren, I kind of miss the classroom. So I said, well, maybe I could make learning about history fun, because a lot of kids aren't interested in history because they think it's just a bunch of facts and boring.
Dates and battles and names.
Yeah, right. Which it really isn't. It's really a reality show. History is really one of the greatest reality shows. And my husband came up with a fantastic idea, because he is an artist and he's been drawing since the age of 5. So he created a cartoon character based on a younger version of me. And that became Little Miss History here. So she's kind of a wannabe park ranger, hiker, combines the things that I used to do. I love to travel, I love to hike. And I used to wear these rose-colored glasses when they were in style.
Oh, is that where they came from? Because I
That's
noticed
where they
she's got
came
those big
from.
glasses on.
Right. And of course, my husband made it a cartoon character, so he exaggerated the features. I really have small ears, not big ears, but he made her cartoony. And she wears these hiking boots that are oversized, and they're in remembrance of my father, who had huge feet. So it's like a combination.
Look like Franken boots. I'm looking at the book. I have one of the books here in front of me, and I was looking at it, and they kind of look like Franken boots now that you mention it. Yeah.
So that's how she evolved, and she narrates all of the stories. So what we do is we go to historical places and historical sites like parks and museums and houses and libraries. And we make it a lot of fun for kids. So the books are heavily illustrated, and they also have real photographs. So we go to the sites and take photographs.
Oh, so you get to write off your
incorporate.
vacations that way.
Yeah,
There you
kind
go.
of. Some of the places I had been to before, and some of the places not. But that's the way we do it. So it's kind of a mixed media. So we have the books. My husband does the design and the layout, and he also is a publisher because he has his own publishing company from years back. So we do everything but the printing of the books. We don't do the physical printing,
Right,
but everything else is a joint process. And that's one of the things that we do sometimes when I go into schools. My husband also comes with me, and kids love to see how a book is put together. You know,
Awesome.
they love to get involved with that. So that's one of the things that we sometimes do. And I put my teacher hat back on during this coronavirus pandemic. I've been scouring the internet for resources. I did a storyteller adventure series with a whole bunch of other authors on Facebook, and every day we did a story and then activities for the children to, correlate with the distance learning. And I've also been, connecting with all of my friends. I have homeschool followers. I have teachers who are followers, and past colleagues. And I've been combining all of that. And every day I post resources on my Facebook and other media outlets. So I'm trying to find all kinds of learning resources for kids.
So if they want to follow you on Facebook, is it under your name or is it under Little Miss History? How would they find you?
I have a Facebook page, littlemisshistory.com. So it's www.facebook.com/littlemisshistory.com. And they can contact me on Facebook. My website is the same, littlemisshistory.com.
Okay. What was your first book in the series?
The first book is Mount Rushmore.
I have Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, that was the very first one. And
just to give people an idea of the inside. See, there's
right now there's Little Miss History scaling and showing them, the proportions and the size. The kids sometimes have a really tough time imagining size.
So I did the first time I went to Mount Rushmore. It's kind of off at a distance from where you can road and where you're observing it. And for me, in one sense, I had just been to the Crazy Horse Monument, which I see you also have in here. And the Crazy Horse Monument feels so huge because it's the site of a mountain, and they're carving the horse. They're taking the mountain away to carve the rest of the horse.
Right.
But Mount Rushmore is carved onto the side. So I thought, oh my gosh, it's so much smaller than I envisioned. But then you get closer up to it and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
And a lot of kids don't know, it's amazing how many people who really don't even know where Mount Rushmore is. Yes. And I love when I'm at an in-person event, I love to ask people when they're passing by, oh, do you know where Mount Rushmore is? And you would be surprised at some of the answers.
Yeah.
But I try to include people, places, events, some things that kind of most people don't know about. So when things come up in my research, I include them. Like I talk about James Anaya, who was a Indigenous rights representative for the UN, and how he got involved with the Crazy Horse Memorial, and how it was trying to get the UN to discuss having both memorials remembered. So I bring in issues like that, Native American rights, in books like the Intrepid. I talk about Alonzo Swan Jr., who
I also have here.
Right. And Alonzo Swan was on the Intrepid during World War II, and he was involved with the Battle of Leyte Gulf when they were hit by kamikaze attacks. And he was with a group of African American gunners who were manning this particular station when they were hit. And Alonzo was a teenager at the time, and they were recognized. He got a Bronze Star.
Wow.
But he should have gotten a much higher award for that. And he kind of felt that he was discriminated against. So he kept advocating for what his group had done during the war. And 50 years later, he was awarded the Navy Cross.
Oh my.
The highest honor. So things like that kids don't know. You know, in my Ford's Theater book, there's Anderson Abbott Ruffin, who was a African American surgeon, and he was there when Lincoln died. He was at the theater because he was on a date with Mary Lincoln's maid.
Really?
Exactly. And
Wow.
they were at the theater in the audience watching the performance downstairs while Lincoln was up in the presidential box. And he was at the bedside while Lincoln was dying, and he became a good friend of the family. In fact, Mary Lincoln gave him a shawl, which remained in his family until very recently, when it was placed in a museum. So, you know, things like that. They're little tidbits, things that kids might want to investigate. And the books, even though they are about history, they also take in other topics, because the La Brea Tar Pits book is about the tar pits, which are present in modern day Los Angeles. And Los Angeles, of course, sits on an oil field. It's like 1,000 feet above an oil field. And in that book, you know, a lot of people don't even realize what is there. They don't really know what the tar pits are. They don't realize that there's an actual archaeological dig going on.
And there's a huge oil field in LA, and people never really think that it's there, but it's still there. It's still operating.
And as they're digging, they're constantly finding more fossils, and they're building a subway out there now, and as they're digging, they're finding more and more fossils. So the whole area is just, you know, riddled.
Well, I don't know if any of our viewers have been to the tar pits. You drive down Santa Monica Boulevard, and there's all these buildings and huge skyscrapers, and then boom, right there in the middle of all this is the La Brea Tar Pits. And they have the tar pit is there still open so they can see what it is, but then they have a fabulous museum that goes with it.
Right, the museum is great. And one of the great things I found was that they have these buckets of tar in cylinders, and you can go and you can try to see how tough it would have been to escape the tar pit. You know. So I think that's great. It's a hands-on, as well as, of course, you can't touch fossils of this, you know, the mastodons and the sloths, but children and adults can see the movie. They have a 3D movie, and then they have a recreated garden that's reminiscent of the Pleistocene age, and they have the kinds of plants that would have been growing there, and you can go out and you can walk through it. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, someday when we can travel again, people, and I think too, for us, we're right in the dead center of Kansas is where the bookstore is, and people, when they're traveling, when they're out on vacation, if they're getting ready to go to some of these places that you write about, I think it would be fabulous to have these books for the kids because it really gets the kids bought into where you're going. I know when I was a kid and we would go on road trips, it was all like, oh, man, are we there yet? You know,
Right. Are we there?
It's crazy. But I think this would be a great activity book to get if you're going to one of those places.
Well, yeah, I have a fan who comes back every year. Well, of course, it was canceled this year, but I do the largest children's book festival in New York every year. And
I was gonna go, and I had my ticket ready and everything, and man, then first they put it off, and then they just canceled it out, right?
yeah, they had to cancel, and this is it's really large festival, 75.
It is huge. It's huge,
and it's great. And I have people that come back every year, and some of them, well, we're going to go here, and and then they pick up the book, or so they do prep by reading the book, and it's great. It gets the kids, and it gets the whole family.
And then the kids look for those kinds of things when they go to these places. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It gets them their creativity going, and I like them to be able to go off in different directions, and that's why the books are so diversified. It's not like that I want to stick to one period or one era. Some of them, like the Sequoia National Park book hits on environment and nature, and the same thing with the North Pole book. The North Pole book is probably the most diverse as far as topics, because it talked a little bit about geography and all of the nations that claim territory in that area. And then I go into some of the animals that live in the Arctic, and we talk about the different flags of the nations, and the whole legend of how Santa Claus came to be, the myths and the history, and some of it was real, some of it wasn't, and then the history of advertising and how that tied in with the whole Santa Claus image. So that one really it's a whole diversity. We even talk about the controversy over the night before Christmas. Now, not many people know that there's a controversy about that, but actually, although it's been widely attributed to Samuel Clement Moore, maybe he didn't write it.
I didn't. I've never heard that.
It might have been Henry Livingston Jr. And I've been to his house. He was related to the Livingston who was involved with writing the Declaration of Independence. It's the same family. And he was a poet, and he had a large family of children, lived here in the Hudson Valley at Claremont. And he was very devoted to his children, and he wrote poetry for his children. And the poem was attributed to Samuel Clement Moore, who was a minister. He had one child, but he was a very stern person. And
that would be hard to really picture him writing that.
Writing
no, it was published anonymously, and so that's why we're talking about attributed to, as opposed to, it didn't come out with a byline.
And he does live in this area as well. So it turns out that he had a cousin, Samuel Clement Moore, had a cousin who was a governess, and she worked at the home of the Livingstons.
Oh, okay.
So some people think that she might have smuggled out some of his poetry. Who knows? But scholars argue, over the writing style and whatnot. But that's also a little tidbit in there.
Intrigue. So the most recent one I have, and I think this is your most recent one, is Tombstone. There's Tombstone. This is actually a hardcover. The others were paperbacks. Do they come out in hardcover and then after a while you put them out in paperback? Or
No,
is this a change?
actually, the opposite. We started out with paperbacks, and a lot of people ask me to consider hardcover for use in the classroom.
Oh, okay.
And I kind of like the idea of a hardcover for children anyway. So we started doing some hardcovers. So the North Pole came out originally in paperback, but then in hardcover. And we did a book on FDR's home and presidential library at Hyde Park.
Mm-hmm.
That one is in hardcover. And then the Tombstone book also is in hardcover.
Are you planning something on Dodge City? Trying to bring Kansas in here somewhere?
Oh, we may.
Maybe
I don't know.
on Dorothy's home, you know?
Yeah, well, yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun. Actually, my daughter once played Dorothy in the play. Wizard.
We're very big on Wizard of Oz out here.
But we may. I mean, I know definitely there are some more books in the West End. The next book is going to be Independence Hall and the Museum of the American Revolution.
Oh, awesome.
And that is a fabulous place, the Museum of the American Revolution.
Well, I haven't been to that. I've been to Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell.
The museum just opened in 2017.
This is why I have not been there. I haven't been back
It is fantastic because it's very interactive, very hands-on. They demonstrate the rifles that we use. They come out and hold them, and kids can touch them and see them.
Oh, I bet kids love that. Yeah.
They have portraits of people who were involved in the revolution and lived long enough to have their pictures taken. And they have photographs of some of these actual people.
Because wasn't that 1840s, 1850s before photography came in?
No, they did have some. These people, they lived some of them lived, too close to 100. So if they were fairly young at the time of the revolution, as photography was coming in, they were able to get some of these photographs. Wow. And they have movies, they have very interactive, they have dioramas, they have a pirate ship, and
a pirate ship.
It's really a fantastic place. So
and when is that book due?
Excuse me?
When are you looking at putting that book out?
I hope the end of the year. Right now, it's finished except for illustration. My husband / illustrator he's involved in another project of his own right now, finishing a book that he's getting out.
How rude.
And it probably toward the end of the year.
Well, you let me know when it comes out, because that sounds like a fun book to have in the store. And we also have a coloring book, a Little Miss History coloring book. And when did you put this one out?
That one's been out a couple of years. Now, what I did with that one is we took some of the portraits and people and places. That's Little Miss History in her diving outfit going up to the Intrepid. And
on a horse.
And that's from the Sequoia book. We took famous quotes from history. And we paired the portraits with the quotes from history.
Nice.
So it's kind of a discussion book as well, and there's an activity page at the end. And the portraits are done kind of in grayscale, so that if you use pencil or watercolor, when you get done, you have pretty much a finished portrait, almost like a frameable type of portrait. There's one other thing that we did mostly for teachers was that we put together trilogy book. This one is called The Adventures of Little Miss History. And what it is
Awesome.
actually 3 of my books in one. So this one has the 3 New York City books, the Statue of Liberty, the Ellis Island, and that, of course, is a very timely topic today, immigration, and the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. So teachers here in New York who wanted to teach local history were interested in having all of the books in one volume. So that one, The Adventures of Little Miss History, that's how that one came about.
Now, your coloring book says volume 1. Is there a volume 2, or is it
Not
someday in
yet.
the works?
There will be eventually. We have volumes on them. So in the Little Miss History Travels 2, there are 11 books. The Tombstone is the most recent. Then there's the Adventures book, which is the trilogy of the 3, and the coloring book that we did volume 1 because we did anticipate eventually doing more.
You know, it's a very good idea to plan ahead.
Right, you never know, and since it is a series, you know, it stands to reason that, you know, pretty much everything I do will probably become a series at some point.
Now, you mentioned teachers. Are you available? We are, of course, probably all over the country teaching virtually these days, although hopefully we will be back in classrooms in the fall. Are you available virtually for classroom discussions, or if they're teaching on a certain topic that you've done a book on, available to come in virtually and talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I've done a lot of in-person, and I've done some virtual. I do Skype. I have Zoom. I could do Google Hangouts, and I do have a YouTube channel, so I can do YouTube as well. So some of the things that I do with either in person or online visits would be, well, it could be something as simple as a storybook reading and discussion. I have discussion questions for every one of my books. I also have activities for my books, like word scrambles, puns, crossword puzzles, that kind of thing. I also sometimes do mini writing workshops on how to write, particularly nonfiction, but not necessarily. You know, I can also do writing workshops. I've done a lot of work with literacy. On one of the other hats I wore in my teaching career, there was a point where I also taught the Wilson Reading Program, which is a program for children that have difficulty reading, a phonics-based program. So I have some experience with different types of reading programs and literacy. So yeah, I can adapt virtually to almost any type of presentation that a teacher has in mind.
And so they would reach out to you either on your website or Facebook, the Little Miss History.
Right. Well, they can message me on Facebook, littlemisshistory.com, or directly through my website. There's a contact on my website, and just write in the contact. You know,
and I'll be posting the website and the Facebook link on the video when I post the video on both my YouTube and on the Facebook site.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. I'm like all over the internet. So mostly it's littlemisshistory.com. I also have a blog. So my blog is bamauthor.me, that my initials BAM author. That's also my Twitter. So on my blog, what I do is, I do a lot of things, but I try to review what I call family-friendly books. So I do almost as much reading as I do writing. These days I'm reading mostly children's books, not so much for my own benefit, but I'm I'm a top reviewer on Amazon, so I do a lot of reviews, and I've kind of transferred many of those to my blog. So my blog is used to share what I consider good reading. I also do tips for authors. So I have that on my YouTube channel and my blog. I adapt pretty much to the situation. I have some coronavirus advice on my blog. I have links also to the story time. So that story time adventure that I did with the authors group, that's also on my YouTube channel.
Nice. So maybe someday there'll also be like a Little Miss History pandemic. Going and looking at
I thought of having her visit perhaps the Spanish flu. Yeah, I've already.
We're all doing a lot of reading up on the Spanish flu right now. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Anything's possible. You know, I've written articles, like I said, for my news magazine. I write articles on sometimes crazy things with angles connected to history, because it depends on what the theme is.
Right.
So I've done articles on all kinds of things with its connection to history. So those are really adult articles. Most of my books are enjoyed by adults as well as kids. You know,
yes,
they're picture books, and at first glance, some older kids will say, "Oh, well, they're picture books," but they're a lot more sophisticated than fiction picture books. And the actual reading level of my books is really middle grade. So I do a readability index
right.
after I finished writing and editing my books. And most of them, when you combine different reading scales, they come out between late 4th and 7th grade, actual independent reading levels. Now, most of my books, I have a glossary to explain more difficult terms, but the vocabulary is not simple. It's fairly sophisticated. So young kids get hooked on the pictures and they get interested that way, and older kids get really into the content and the different perspectives and ways.
And for the older kids, it's kind of like those graphic novels that are so popular. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We are out of time. Is there anything else you want to tell people before we go?
Oh, hang in there. I think we're right now we're pretty stressed. But as my character, Little Miss History, says, if you don't know your history, you don't know what you're talking about. Things will get better. And history not only teaches us about the past, as I said, it's really a reality show. It's about real people who get up and eat breakfast and go to work and suffer trials and tribulations and overcome them. So I think one of the most important messages is that we're all characters in history. We have the ability to learn from it. We have the ability to improve it. And there's always hope for the future.
I like that idea. We're all characters in history.
As soon as we're born, we're born like right in the middle of it, right? So people have come before us, people will come after us, but once we're born, we are an agent of history. We are a part of it.
I think that's a good way to wrap us up. Go out and make yourself part of history. Thank you thank you, Barbara, for being with us. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Again, Russell Specialty Books and Gifts, or you can reach out to Barbara, littlemisshistory.com, and tune in for the next interview.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye now.